And it's not, it's less of a relationship and and more recognizing that we just are a part of the natural world, and we have, or we're progressively forgetting that, or progressively becoming disconnected and not understanding how we actually relate to, the light that's coming in through the window, or the water that we're drinking, or the food.
Welcome, Big Bold Immunity. Oh, this is such an important area for this time and age, and how we approach the concept of immunity goes well beyond that of colds and flu or even SARS-CoV-2. It goes into the whole of how we're living, and today we have the privilege of having a discussion with an extraordinary energy, a person who really has a vision, has the inherent kind of magic about how you take this information, create value out of it, and then repurpose it out to people for their value. We're going to be talking with Rachelle Robinett, who is, I think, an amazing guide, a woman who is coming up in the world with her advocacy, and I think all of us can draw both energy and example from her message and her experience. So let's move into our discussion with herbalist Rachelle Robinett. Well, here we are, and I'm so excited to be part of this Big Bold Health podcast experience with Rachelle Robinett. Let me just say a couple of preliminary words before we have the pleasure and privilege of getting Rachelle involved. As you know, this whole field of healthcare has been a longstanding passion of mine, going back now, I even hate to even say it, more than 4 decades, hard to believe. But I've had the privilege over those years of meeting many, many people, and what I've come to recognize is that this wave of health vigilance and health advocacy is really carried by and driven by leaders who have a certain energy, they have a certain vitality, they have a certain perspective, they have a certain sense of community, they have a certain joie de vivre about them that is infective and infectious and brings people with them into this world of self-regulation, of people taking charge, of being part of their own life experience in which they're not a victim, but they're actually orchestrating their life. And what I've recognized is that the generation that's coming up now behind me, and now it's 2 generations behind me, are individuals that have an extraordinary vision about what the world should be and how it could be, and how to make it that way, so that we restore and nourish values that can lead to perpetuation of survival and flourishing of joy and bliss and great opportunities for achievement over the course of years to come. And one of those people happens to be Rachelle Robinett. So that's why I'm so privileged to have her in this discussion. And I've known Rachelle for many years. I won't say how many, but let's just say it's more than a few. And she has grown up to be an incredible force of nature in the natural world. She's an herbalist, she's a nutrition expert, she's a personality, she is an entrepreneur, she is a guide and teacher. That's a pretty reasonable biography just to start with, but we could add a lot of other things onto it. She is an individual whose personality will illuminate by her own presence. So with that introduction, Rachelle, thanks so much for joining us on the Big Bold Health podcast. And I can't think of anyone that may better represent Big Bold Health than Rachelle Robinett. So let me start in the usual place I probably should. What brought you, with all of your talents and background experience, into this field and keeps you as a person who's so dedicated to its evolution?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for that introduction. That was definitely my favorite ever. So I'm glad it's recorded. I really appreciate it. What brought us here? I think that, there's a combination of factors from growing up in a very health-aware home. Both of my parents, in different ways, were very much in medicine, in Western medicine, in natural medicine and nutrition, and in just, having an interest in the way that the human body works and the way that the body and the mind work together. And, we would bang our knee or get a bloody nose or get a headache. And it wasn't quick, let's fix it. It was, why, does this thing happen? Why do we have this symptom? What is your body telling you? What can we learn? What's happening here? And I think some of those lessons ultimately did bring me to where I am now. It's this sort of curiosity and this perpetual sort of interest in the way that the body, mind, and the natural world all work together. I think it's also the need in the world that drew it out of me professionally. So I was not intending to be an herbalist. I came to New York to work in fashion, I was not intending to be sort of in the health and wellness industry. And I used to have conversations as a kid with my dad, sort of vehemently, like, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. I want to be creative and artsy and, do this other stuff. But I had a knowledge that I was using personally and have been using my whole life. And the world wanted it. They said, can you please help me? Can you teach me how to eat? Can you teach me how to use these herbs? Can you share what you know? And after hearing that enough times, I said, okay, yes, and began Supernatural. That's the very short story, but I would say being steeped in it from a young age, practicing it personally, with extreme dedication for as long as I can remember, really, and then having the world say, we want some of that, versus the coming out of Supernatural, which is my company.
Well, I think you said so many really important things there that I just want to highlight. The first of which is listening to what the world is telling us. I think all of us, as we go through our life experience, get messages from the universe that kind of help guide us if we're willing to listen. But often, we're so busy with our own sense as to what's around us, we don't hear these broader things that are coming to us that might be enlightening and maybe frame shifting and maybe miraculous alternatives or options for us to explore. And I think it takes a certain kind of personality to be open to being a listener while you're also focused down onto doing the work of the daily job and whatever you think your task is. So I want to compliment you on your capability of still maintaining from your artful perspective what the world was asking you and telling you, and also reinforcing in you that you're good at, and that kind of giving you that add a person, go for it. That's number one. Number two, I think to move from the West Coast to New York, which is a great laboratory for self-development and experience and exploration and pathfinding. But not everybody who comes into that environment has a successful experience. So what do you think allowed you to be successful in making that transition from, a West Coast, maybe more simple universe to a more complex social matrix?
Oh man, it was rough. I'll say that New York is not easy in the sort of getting to know process. The only thing that I can think is just pure grit, to be honest. I had no friends, no job, no, long-term place to live. Just that story of 2 suitcases and a lot of ambition. And it really kind of tested, those early years really tested, like, how bad do you want this? How much do you really have in you to kind of make it here? And that, I think it was just that. I think it was this grit that is partly nature and partly nurture. I definitely have both been taught it. We grew up on a farm. We learned hard work. We learned to sort of find the limits of what you physically and mentally are capable of doing. And I think the combination of just like the day-to-day sort of survival in a place like New York as a young person with no real safety net, and then the simultaneous, I'm not just trying to get a job to pay rent, which I am, but also like I'm here to do something. And that became kind of what I'm doing now. And that's taken, I've been here for 11 years or 12 years now. And it's like finally kind of coming to its full fruition. And that's a long path of dedication. which is obviously not over, but it's, it's like the first flower now, sort of what it feels like.
Well, I think it's more than the first flower. I think you've got a pretty good garden growing there, but hopefully it's perennial as well as annuals, right?
Great metaphor, yeah.
So let's talk about how you landed on your entrepreneurial focus and how you named your company, because all of that is part of your identity. So how did that happen?
Yeah, it's so funny. The company has even affected like the way I dress now. I like wear, herbal fashion. So it did go through a few different, not a few, but a couple of different variations in the beginning. Originally the company was just RX, sort of like the prescription RX, and that was kind of an early branding exploration that I had. And then fairly soon after that, I think when we became a little bit more official, it took a long time to come to the name Supernatural, which is funny because it makes sense, and it's a great name. We're trademarking it and all those important steps, which is hard to do with a name like Supernatural, but it actually took multiple brainstorming sessions over the course of many months with a couple of different people that I really respect to articulate what exactly are we doing here. And, in the early days, it was not as clear as it is now. What exactly are we doing here? And, I think that herbalism and nutrition and holistic health and functional medicine are so many things that it can be hard to put a label on it. My title has changed so many times: holistic health practitioner, wellness coach, all these different things, because we are talking about nutrition and we're talking about herbs and supplements and lifestyle habits and all these different things. But Supernatural really represents, obviously, I don't even think I have to explain Supernatural, which makes it, it's a good name, people get it. But I am working with the natural world and primarily with plant-based remedies, food and herbalism to help people be super well, Well,
it's interesting to me the name or the title or the word Supernatural can connote multiple things to multiple people, right? Which is really kind of cool because a person can read in their own kind of perspective. So supernatural could be above natural. It could be the best of natural, right? That's one kind of literal translation. Another is it could be beyond natural. It could be in the hereafter. It can be in the environment of the ether of the id that we don't understand. And it probably draws people from both philosophical camps, I would imagine, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And they're all welcome here too. And they're all very welcome in the herbal world, because I think, herbalism, you can take a very functional perspective where you can be much more interested in the mystical or energetic or supernatural realms of the plant world. So it works for everyone, and this works for everyone. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how a person would connect in with your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see. So I would say most people find us online first these days, as happens. I have an Instagram following. We have both one for Supernatural and myself, and so people tend to find us there. We also have a weekly now newsletter, which is really popular. So a lot of people are linked in digitally to that, getting a lot of kind of advice there. And then we do have the physical cafe. So we have basically a tea shop, an apothecary, a wall of herbs, and this really great space where you can come in and see and touch and feel and taste all the things that we talk about online. You can, get custom blended herbs. You can shop all the products that, I recommend all day long to clients and classes. It's a really nice physical, presence for Supernatural. Or you can do that all online with our online shop, with online classes. So there's more of Supernatural online than in person. But if you're in New York or Brooklyn, then you can swing by the shop and meet us there. Yeah.
So what's your address?
Our address, so we're at Industry City, which is a really big it's like a mini city in Brooklyn. Our address is 254 36th Street, but most people just know Industry City is the destination, and then you can find Supernatural there. It's in Sunset Park in Brooklyn.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That's a huge, I know it's a step along the journey, but it's some pretty good steps you've laid down there. It's very exciting. So let's jump back now a little bit to our shared enthusiasm, advocacy, and work for this concept of regenerating the planet and the plant world as part of what I think is a planetary immune system. And when we look at from a big board health perspective, and people have asked me, so Jeff, you've been around here for a lot of decades. Why are you doing something like this? I mean, can't you just kind of sit as a senior citizen and weigh in on opinions? And why would you start a company, Big Bold Health? And my answer to that is fairly simple, and that is, first of all, in 4+ decades of doing this, I feel like I have a payback because I've really been so fortunate to meet and be impacted in a favorable way by so many remarkable people in my 6 million miles of travel and all the things that I've had the privilege of doing, that I feel that comes a little bit with a payback to hand off what I've learned that might be of value to others. So that was number one. But number two, I felt that, having started off as a professor of environmental science and chemistry at the University of Puget Sound in 1970 on Earth Day, that's why I was hired actually, was because they were trying to find a professor to start a environmental science program out of the chemistry department because it was Earth Day's first year and they wanted to be part of that rising academic opportunity. So I started as an environmental science and scientist and chemist at the University of Puget Sound, and over the years I found that those two things really served me very well. In the 13 years I was a professor there and teaching both on the biochemistry side and the clinical medicine side, and also teaching on the environmental science side, that they actually married themselves together in my mind as a healthy planet, healthy people, and vice versa. So now, as I see what's going on in the world at large and have become more understanding of the important role that the immune system plays in how we 24/7, 365 as people defend ourselves against things out there that might want to take advantage of us, not just SARS-CoV-2 and not just cold and flu, but all sorts of things, chemicals and toxins and toxic emotions and all sorts of things. All of that becomes part of my belief that the immune system is like kind of the center of the locus of control of health, because it's something that's sampling our outside world 24/7. So, and it changes. Every 2 months, our immune system is reborn. People don't understand that 2 months from now, the cells that we call our immune cells will be different than the ones that are today. So will they be as good as, better than, or worse than the ones we have today? That's a question. And we can reform or remake the immune system based upon how we treat it and how we relate to it. So with that as a concept, when I was waxing philosophical, as I often do on a Monday morning after going to a meeting, my colleague Trish Urey, who has worked with me now for over 25 years now, said, Jeff, it's really great that you're always on your soapbox here when you come back on Monday, but you're a big guy. These are bold ideas. Maybe you need to start another company called Big Bold Health and really give you a platform to talk about this. So that became for me the start of this some 2.5 years ago. And then from that, it led me into two things that I have been intimately involved in as, I guess you'd call them hobbies. One is Alaska fishing, in the Alaska fishing community and Alaska native populations. Boating has been, and kayaking and exploration has been my kind of family hobby, and now my kids are involved with that, and now their kids, my grandkids, are involved in it. So we're all kind of Alaskan adventurers. And the other is agriculture and food production and sustainable agriculture and organic, which I've been involved with for 30-some years. And so I thought, could I marry those two together in such a way to make them tools for Big Bold Health? And through that then led to a series of what I call coincidences. They probably weren't coincidences, but serendipities that led me into Himalayan Tartary buckwheat, led me into a sustainable fish oil product. We built the first pharmaceutical grade plant in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, out in the Aleutians. And so now here I am back in the commercial world, but my advocacy has been around nurturing the planet and connecting the immune system of the planet to the immune system of people in a harmonious way. So then that led me, obviously, back to you, because although you've taken your own individual approach, our approaches do converge in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So with all of that long-winded hot air that I just expressed, tell us a little about your mission and how this connects this concept of regenerative agriculture, natural herbal products, how it connects into your philosophy.
Yeah. Oh gosh, so many things to respond to. Firstly, I mean, the Alaskan salmon, I grew up on that, and to this day, it's the epitome of of a perfect food. That surprises people because I'm a plant-based advocate. But man, this wild Alaska salmon that's caught well and respectfully, I just don't know if you can beat that. So, and it's really neat to hear more of your journey. My mission is to help people to understand their own health better, their own body and mind, and that relationship, and absolutely that full relationship to the natural world. And it's not, it's less of a relationship and more recognizing that we just are a part of the natural world, and we have, or we're progressively forgetting that, or progressively becoming disconnected and not understanding how we actually relate to, the light that's coming in through the window, or the water that we're drinking, or the food. So I really want to both empower people to be able to live in their body, mind, environment better. I think that happens through simplifying so much of this information and just making it accessible, making it cool, making it inspiring and, practical. And this stuff, we're in it every minute of every day, and it's not an indulgence, and it doesn't have to be an extra thing. Like, it is the stuff of life, and it can be preventative. It can also, reverse a frightening diagnosis. I mean, all these things, and I just, I want to give that to people, and do give that to people, and they get a little taste of that change. And from there, it's like the whole world opens up, when you can feel the change, or you can see the change. And a lot of times people have been, trying for so long and kind of stuck. And I think that we, again, try to simplify and make it really practical, and also make it relate directly to this world that we're in all the time, is what really helps. And for me, yes, it's plant-based. This all does come back to nature, and it's really just that we are all we are all that system. We get ill when we get disconnected, or don't understand how to relate to each other.
Yeah,
buy into your question.
Yeah, I think that's well. First of all, these great questions of life never have complete answers, right? What I find is that they are answers in process, because each day we learn a little bit more, and we never learn enough to be complete, unless maybe we're some Zen master, maybe. But for most of us, we aspire to learn more each day towards some kind of a self-realization, self-understanding. And I think that this construct that you've set up and how you're doing it, to me, is very enlightened. I wish. I have granddaughters coming up, and I'm hopeful my granddaughters will find in their lives as they become young women, and they are becoming young women as they become older young women, that they will have this advocacy to take the things that they've learned and been exposed to and had opportunity to integrate in their lives, and take that out to their broader constituency, because I think it's that advocacy. And I believe also that we are in an epic period where feminine energy is going to be really, really important for the healing of the planet and for the reconsolidation of global communities. I think that, there was a time probably where the male energy that's driven by one pentacyclic molecule, testosterone, was advantageous because a lot of stuff that was done was manual labor and moving stuff around and picking stuff up and pushing stuff from one place to another. And maybe there is, we could probably is arguable, but I think there might be some advantage just from a mechanical musculo strength basis for the male with the higher testosterone levels and greater muscular strength to survive in those kinds of environments. And so maybe there's something about maleness in early stage societal development. But I think over time, and certainly in this time, different kind of energies become very important. Cooperative energies of collaboration, energies of deeper thought and communication, maybe less the specifics of the piece parts and more of why the watch works as a watch rather than worrying about each of the springs and gears. And so I think that this period of time in which we start talking about the complexity of the world as a guide to the simplicity of our life, that concept of simplexity. So we absorb complexity to understand how simple our life can be if we get rid of a bunch of garbage out of the house and we clear out space to really be free living. And I think that's what you're teaching and that's what you represent. And that's to some extent what we're trying to do in Big Bold Health. We're trying to redefine health as being big and bold and owned by the individual as to what their definition of health is. And it may be different than someone else's. For one person, it may be, I want to run a marathon. For another person, it might be, I want to go to my grandchildren's college graduation. Or it could be many different things that define our health. But to define it and then provide an access to it so that it is big and bold in its achievement is a mandate for Big Bold Health.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that that's what comes through about supernatural, because I think that's very much a personal priority too, which is this creating space and creating this simplicity. And yes, kidding. I'm thinking about so many things now, it's from the physical clutter to the digital clutter of this, world that we live in, all the intakes that we have, and really just reducing it to, funny enough, some of the things we've known all along are responsible for our health, which come from the natural world. So, yeah.
So I want to acknowledge the art and style side of your being, because I think, as I've grown up, my sister is an artist. She's a commercial artist. My niece, her daughter, was a Berkeley Fine Arts graduate and is quite an artist in her own right, has done illustrations for children's books and is really skilled. I wasn't granted that talent in terms of the visual arts. I thought of myself more, maybe hopefully a little artistic with words and languaging, but I was not a kind of an artist of the same type. But I've always admired it. And now what I recognize is that everything is art in life if you see it in the right way. Everything fits into an artful framework. And the more that you can accentuate the art component of it, the more it speaks not just to your inductive reasoning, it speaks to the deeper sense of who we are, our soulful being. And if you really want to have impact in this world, you can't just speak to the frontal cortex of the brain. You've got to speak to the deep emotive parts that drive people's behaviors and their belief systems, and that is somewhere in their art center. It's somewhere in their soul of art. So you're a very artful person, and the reason I know that is not just because you've told me that you are, but because I look at how you present yourself on your podcast and your social media. I also saw what you did recently for us with our Big Bold Health Tartary buckwheat flour. And I thought, man, that little kind of video compilation you put together of the different recipes that you mixed, that is really artful. So where does that come from? That's cool.
Where does it come from? I think it's also nature and nurture. I do, there, I have like, I'm thinking I have certain relatives who are poets and can draw. I can't draw for anything, but, I always loved making potions, and I do write, and I loved taking photos, and I had all these different sort of artistic explorations that are sort of in my person. And it was a little bit of a problem when I was younger. It's like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because you can't be all those different things. And, ultimately I went to business school. My heart wanted to be an artist, but I went to business school. And so now what I'm doing is integrating, my whole person in this current, space, which is supernatural, which does allow me to be artful. And I mean, just as an aside, working with plants and with beautiful food, to me, that is art all day long. Like, it is just gorgeous to, cut open the right tomato or brew rose petals. And like, I have my face in that stuff all day, which is total joy. And so I think just turning it around, thanks to social media and letting people see the recipes that I am playing with, or the herbs that I am, making, that I'm formulating, or whatever it is, for me, I get to combine kind of a love of nature, a love of the art of photography or video, the recipes, and the real magic of making, food medicine or herbal medicine. And then again, thanks to digital, now we can just kind of put it out in the world and you can all see sort of behind the scenes. But it comes from, kind of a combination of being truly obsessed with the beauty of what nature produces, and then we get to eat and drink and, see and smell, and also having part of my, person still want to be an artist, which I fully intend to do.
Well, I think you are. I don't think your intention has been met. It's just a question of how you're going to grow that up and expand it over time. But one of the things that struck me was really, and I'm sure you noticed this, when you did some work on our Himalayan Tartary buckwheat flour, and you produced some really beautiful products, some recipe products from that. I'm sure you noticed that as you started to work with that particular flour, as contrasted to other flours, it undergoes color changes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it undergoes color changes, and my left hemisphere, my brain, my chemistry side, says the reason it undergoes color changes is as you add fluid to it and other ingredients, that it then activates specific enzymes in that live flour, because it's very live, and those enzymes start pre-digesting some of those flavonoids into other compounds that become very bioactive, and they have colors to them. So I'm sure you've noticed that it actually, the fresh flour has one color, but once hydrated and it sits around in the bowl for a while, it becomes another color. And then if you put it in the refrigerator and put a cover on it and come back a few days later, it becomes another color, because it's actually undergoing a live process of generating downstream secondary metabolites from these polyphenols. So it's a really interesting example of art and science kind of being seen. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just like, and I didn't know that would be the cause. But now knowing that, or hearing that and sharing that with people, like, that is so inspiring. And that alone, would convince me to have more of this flour and less of any other flour. I think the ability to share, again, kind of the magic of nature, it does a lot of the work for me, at least, just communicating, this is what's actually happening out there. You probably want some of it. People are like, yes, I do, actually, so.
Well, to me, when I started playing around with that particular seed, it's not a grain, it's a seed, I was amazed to see that so much of its genes are dedicated to producing nearly 100 different phytochemicals. And then I started asking the question, well, how does that compare to common buckwheat? First of all, it's a shame that we call these things buckwheat, because putting wheat in the name suggests that they're some relationship to wheat, which they're not at all. They have no genealogical connection to wheat at all. But anyway, that's the way the name happens, so it's stuck. So I asked the question, what's the difference between common buckwheat and this Tartary buckwheat that we've been using and developing? And it turns out that the genes of the Tartary buckwheat, although they have similarity to common buckwheat, code for producing more than 60 to 100 times, not percent, times as much of these phytochemicals as common buckwheat. So then I asked the question, well, why would a plant spend so much of its energy to have genes that made so much of this stuff? I mean, it doesn't do it because it doesn't have anything else to do with its life. It does it for a reason. And so then you go back to its history, knowing that it's been consumed as a food for about 2,500 years, so it's a lot longer age than that. And it grew up in the very hostile Tibetan, Himalayan mountain region, southern Himalayas, and under very hostile conditions. And to survive, it didn't get irrigated. It had to sit out in the sun and get sunburned, and it had pests, and it had all these it actually grew in very bad soils, very high aluminum soils. So it turns out that it developed genes that detoxify aluminum. It produces all these plant insecticides that are these polyphenols that keep insects from eating it. It has anti-sunburn cream built in that are these flavonoids. And it basically survived against all hostile elements that would normally have put plants in that environment that wouldn't have survived. So then I asked the metaphorical question, well, what is that plant really doing? And what's really doing is it's evolved its immune system. And if it's evolved its immune system, then what happens if we eat that plant? Because those things speak to our immune system. It's really kind of an interesting network of thinking of how we're interconnected in this whole cycle. So all of that to me it just drew me in. It became my big, bold health okay, this is a metaphor to everything we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's your mascot. Fascinating. Yeah, and I as soon as I started down this sort of plant path, obviously, I'm hooked, because I think that nature is just full of, stories like that. That plant is clearly, exceptional. But I think that the herbal world, which is really just the natural world, has so many similar kind of stories.
Well, now tell me, in our few minutes remaining, now that you've hacked your path into the forest of the unknown, and you've laid your first stepping stones, well, not your first, many of your stepping stones, where do you see your journey taking you? What's your big dream? What's your hairy, audacious goal?
Yeah, so I just want to bring this to as many people as possible. I am scaling supernatural in every direction that we can to be, not less one-to-one, but more one-to-many, and bringing, all of our education online. We have more and more online classes. There will be a book or books in the future. Our product line is expanding quite quickly. And for the most part, right now it's about up and out and just getting in touch with as many people as possible. I want to empower people to understand their health and be able to navigate the space, connect with nature better every day.
Well, I think
it doesn't seem so unreasonable,
No, I think it seems very reasonable, and it's going to happen just by your energy, your force of nature, and your commitment. But I think you said something there that's really a watchword for all of our viewers. I have distilled down a philosophy of life into two alternatives. One you've already expressed very, very well, up and out. The other is down and in. Down and in versus up and out. And under those two very gross headings, you can put all sort of subtopics. But if you're in the down and in side, it takes you in a certain direction. If you're in the up and out side, it takes you in a different direction. Now, it has been my thought that we as a society right now are caught a little bit too much in the down and in. And we're in a do loop of the down and in model. And we can see where it takes us. It doesn't take us into a good place if that is your only vision of your future, is down and in. And I think what you just said is so prescient and so informative that we need to find a way, each one of us, individually, as to what helps to take us up and out rather than down and in. Now, for you, your passion has provided a vehicle for not only you, but many others to share that vision, to find an up and out route to express our goodness. I think there are a lot of people who are on the down and in path, and what it is forcing them to do is not express their goodness, but express their angst, their anxiety, their anger, their rage, their frustration, their feeling of inadequacy, their feeling of being lost. And when you're in that do loop, I believe that it takes you into a place over time that is not going to be in the best interest of getting the full expression of what your genes are capable of doing. For most of us, we're given this legacy, right? Our book of life. And it's up to us to figure out how we're going to read our book of life in our genetics and what it's going to become as we grow up and go on. And I think that this model that you just described, that is underpinning your business and your philosophy personally, up and out, is a model that I hope everyone listens to that's watching this podcast.
Yeah, me too. So well said. And I have to say, I also really appreciate your continued reference to health as, individual and therefore relative. There's a lot, especially as the wellness industry has become, this big machine, all for the better, but mostly for the better. But to understand that it's not so much about, what the industry or the trends are dictating, but individually we can all improve our health, have our health, change the path that we maybe were started on. So just really appreciate that point as well.
Well, in the course notes, we're obviously going to give your referral of information to your website and so forth, but do you want to just verbally say it for people that are hanging on every word and would like to write it down immediately?
Yes, find Supernatural at You Are Supernatural, and that's the letter U, the letter R, supernatural.com. It's all there. You'll find Instagram and online store and cafe and all the herbal education you will ever need, hopefully, there. Thank you.
Well, I can say on behalf of our Big Bold Health community, that we are very, very appreciative of who you are, what you're doing, where you're going. We need so many people like you creating the world that will be. I want to leave this world to my grandkids and beyond that will be as good or better than the opportunities I had, and you're doing that through your work. So thank you so much. We really appreciate all that you are.
Thank you so much.